Welcome to Short Movie Channel. At the beginning of our movie, we meet a beloved teenager named Claire Parker. She's 18 years old and lives alone with her mother in a small town in the United States. Claire works evening shifts at a store, and usually, her boyfriend, Jimmy, is the one who drives her home. But one day, while waiting for Jimmy to pick her up, she's shocked to see a strange man driving Jimmy's car. The man introduces himself as Desmond and claims that Jimmy sent him to give her a ride. Claire feels uneasy and doesn't want to get in the car with him, but since she's running late for school, she has no choice but to go with him. Unfortunately, during the ride, Desmond keeps making her uncomfortable, flirting with her, telling her she's the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, and even asking for her phone number. Claire refuses to respond, ignoring him completely. After a while, they finally arrive, and Claire quickly gets out of the car, rushes inside, and locks the door behind her, hoping the creepy man will leave. 5 minutes later, she peeks through the window and sees him walking away at last. But the moment she turns around, she's horrified to find the back door wide open. And before she can react, Desmond suddenly appears from the basement. Claire screams, but no one comes to her rescue. In the next scene, Claire suddenly opens her eyes and finds herself at the store where she works. Her shift is almost over, and she's exhausted. It turns out that everything we just saw was nothing but a nightmare. After finishing work, she waits in the same spot she did the night before. But this time, Jimmy himself arrives in his car. Claire feels relieved when she sees him, and on the way home, she tells him about the terrifying nightmare she had, explaining how she was brutally murdered. But Jimmy doesn't take it seriously and quickly changes the subject. Once they reach school, Jimmy waits outside for her. Later that night, they go for a walk in an empty area. Suddenly, a drop of blood falls on Claire. She tells Jimmy to look around and see if anyone's there. But after searching, he finds nothing. Claire assumes she's still shaken by the nightmare. When she gets home, she decides to take a cold shower to calm her nerves. But as soon as she closes her eyes, she relives the nightmare, seeing the same creepy man dragging her toward the basement and killing her brutally. Lost in thought, she suddenly notices the bathroom door slowly creaking open. She quickly gets up to check what's going on. Moments later, she hears strange noises coming from the basement. She cautiously makes her way down and finds the room completely dark. When she switches on the light, she's startled to see her mother standing there, staring blankly at the wall as if she's possessed. Claire asks her what she's doing down there, and her mother responds that she's looking for something. Claire is confused by the strange behavior, but she doesn't ask any further questions and just heads back to her room. The next day, she tries to forget the nightmare and spends time with Jimmy and their friends, playing basketball and having fun. That night, as Jimmy drives her home, Claire notices a mysterious figure in the distance but brushes it off. Later, and then she told Jimmy what she saw, so they stopped to check the place but found nothing. And went back to the car. On the way they started discussing it. Later at home, while standing in front of a mirror, she sees the reflection of that same figure. What's even stranger is that she has a vision of Desmond running through the woods, being chased by the police. Something eerie is definitely going on. That night, while working at the store, Claire gets bored due to the lack of customers. She decides to take a short break, only to find herself trapped in the same nightmare once again. After running for a bit, Desmond reaches a house in the middle of the forest. He grabs his gun to defend himself and fires at the police. But when he looks around, he finds Detective Miller in the room, holding a rifle. At that moment, Claire regains consciousness, feeling scared and confused by what's happening. As she tries to process the situation, she notices someone entering the store and hiding behind the shelves. Claire sends an emergency alert and grabs a metal rod to confront the man. She slowly moves toward the shelves where he was standing, unaware of what's coming. Suddenly, he attacks her, trying to strangle her. Claire fights back, scratching his face and gouging out his eye until he starts to weaken. But despite everything, he refuses to let go and keeps choking her. At the last moment, he finally releases her and says, "No, not yet." After he leaves, the police arrive with Detective Miller, the same one Claire had seen in her nightmares. They take Claire to the station, where Detective Miller questions her about what happened. But every time she tries to explain that the man tried to kill her, the other officers in the room laugh at her. Then, Detective Miller pulls up a security camera recording and shows it to her. The shocking truth is revealed: Claire had been hallucinating the entire time. She had been fighting with herself, and there was no killer at all. On top of that, the police found no blood at the scene. Seeing all this evidence, Claire becomes certain of what she experienced and tells Miller that she felt an unbearable pain as if she was really being strangled. But then, Miller drops a bombshell: Desmond had actually killed himself about a week ago. Claire then realizes that the strange man was the one who murdered 2 teenagers. As she finally starts to accept the truth and comes to terms with the fact that she might be losing her mind, Detective Miller decides to take her home. On the way, Claire falls asleep and has another vision. This time, she sees her boyfriend, Jimmy, fixing a car. At first, the dream seems normal, but after a while, the mysterious man appears and attacks Jimmy with an axe. Claire suddenly wakes up in the car, but this time, Detective Miller and the other officers are gone. When she looks around, she realizes she's in the same garden she saw earlier, the one where she had seen a man burying something. As she tries to make sense of the situation, Desmond appears, carrying a body on his back, which is most likely Jimmy's. He places the body in the car. Claire screams in terror, but she's completely helpless. Desmond then gets into the car next to her and starts driving. After a while, they arrive at the house. Desmond tries to calm her down, insisting that what's happening isn't real, but the suffering she feels is. That's when Claire decides she has to break the cycle this time and do something different. The first change she makes is not waiting for Jimmy in the same place. Instead, she walks home. On the way, she sees the same garden she saw before, along with Desmond. But before he can notice her, Claire hides behind a tree. Later, while she's in class, she falls asleep and has another nightmare. This time, she dreams of Desmond approaching Jimmy, who is lying in a pool of blood. Desmond finishes him off. A moment later, Claire wakes up from the nightmare, rushes out of the classroom, and finds Jimmy arriving to walk her home. Jimmy notices that something is wrong and keeps asking her what's going on, but Claire refuses to say anything. When he keeps pressing her for answers, she finally tells him that she's been seeing strange things, visions of a man who keeps appearing everywhere she goes and kills her in horrifying ways. In one of these nightmares, he even killed Jimmy, as if the two of them were trapped in a never-ending loop. At the beginning, Jim laughs at what she's telling him, but when Claire gets upset and says she'll go alone, Jim decides to help her. After a while, the two head to a local church, where they meet the priest. He tells them not to worry because Desmond is dead, and even if he haunts places with bricks, he can't do anything to her since he's in hell. But Claire is still not convinced, so she decides to visit Desmond's abandoned house to look for evidence. After a while, they actually go to Desmond's house, which is deep in the woods with nothing around it. It turns out to be a small, old house with a few rooms inside. While Claire searches through the rooms, Jim enters the house to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, Desmond suddenly arrives, alive. He notices someone is inside his house and rushes in with his gun. Claire then hears gunfire and freezes in fear. Desmond puts the body in his car and drives off. Later that night, Claire goes to school and then heads to the library, where she looks up information about the past. To her shock, she finds an article that states that Claire and Jim were kidnapped about a month ago. But until now, no one has found Claire, and because of this, people assume she's dead. Claire starts to panic, desperate to understand what's going on. She leaves the library and heads toward the garden where she saw someone earlier. It could be Desmond. She stands in the same spot where she saw him before and starts digging in the ground. After a while, she finds her own face, but it's distorted. That means she really is dead in reality. At the same time, Desmond arrives in his car. Claire starts running, and after hours of running, she goes to her friend Tina's house and tells her everything that happened. Since Tina is a good friend, she calms Claire down and tells her to rest in the other room while she calls the police. Claire does just that. While waiting for the police, she sees Detective Miller and Desmond inside the house. Desmond tries to prove his innocence, saying that someone implanted a chip in his brain, forcing him to kill teenagers. But Detective Miller doesn't buy it. He shoots Desmond and kills him. Claire overhears someone talking on the phone. It's clear they're not with the police. She listens in and hears them saying that Desmond will eventually adjust over time. Claire moves closer to understand what's happening and realizes the man on the phone is Desmond himself, the killer, and he's there to kill her as usual. Luckily, Claire locks herself in a room, escapes through the window, steals Desmond's car, and drives away, trying to get as far as possible. After a while, she returns home, searching for her mother, but she's nowhere to be found. Then she hears screaming from the basement. It's her mother, crying out for help. Claire knows if she goes down there, she might never come back alive. But when she hears her mother's desperate pleas, she decides to take the risk and go down. However, the shocking truth is revealed when Claire gets closer. Her mother grabs her and says, "You don't understand. You're supposed to relive what you did." Claire tries to escape, but in that moment, her mother looks at her and says, "Why, Mom?" as if she's talking to someone else. In the end, her mother tells her, "You're the killer who murdered my daughter." At this moment, we finally realize that the Claire we've been following since the beginning of the movie was actually Desmond all along. Desmond is now being tormented, paying for the sins he committed. The world he's living in isn't real. It's a fabricated reality where the demon hunting him is punishing him for his crimes. Because of the murders he committed in life, he's doomed to experience endless brutal deaths at the hands of this demon. On top of that, he was reincarnated as Claire so he could feel the same fear his victims felt and relive the terror she went through before he killed her. This cycle will never end. No matter how much he tries to run or hide, the demon will always find him and kill him in the end. In the final scene, we see Desmond getting killed by the demon once again, and then Claire, who is actually Desmond, reawakens, resetting the loop from the beginning. And that's the end of the movie. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.